you for that. Yep. Here
Elizabeth, who do you want from your staff in here?
Sandra Montoya,
All right.
please.
So how are we doing for time, guys? I think I've got 1:31, so we should get started.
We're ready, Commissioner.
And at first, folks, we did have to approve with the commissioners that are here. We have a ABC appointed board and commission that we wanted to approve before we immediately jump into the budget. So I don't know, Commissioner Fisher, did you read it? Do you have comments or?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Schrader. I think I did. I read every applicant, and I'm sure the rest of my colleagues did as well. There was an amazing group of folks applying, incredible interest. And I had a wonderful talk with Martine as well, because there were more people that applied than there are actual official positions. We had talked about keeping this group engaged that had applied that were not selected to be on the committee, and suggesting that they provide comment during public comment periods or be involved with other ABCs to just keep folks engaged, because it's really pretty amazing effort. So with that, if there aren't any other comments, I'll make a motion to approve the recommendations from staff.
Okay. We have,
So if I may, this is the Committee Leaders for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. That's what you're voting.
that's what we're doing. So Christina, do you want to call the roll?
Yes, I was just making sure. Do you guys want me to read through the ABC first, or we're just moving forward?
Well, read the names, please.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
Okay, so the Leaders of Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Council, staffed by the Equity and Inclusion Office, had 32 applications received. 14 applications were being recommended for appointment. Members will serve a 3-term year beginning September 1st, 2020. The recommendations are Bonnie Lander, this is a 2nd term, Claire Calhoun, a 2nd term, Ernest Troy Blackwell for a 2nd term, Fernando Sabravilla for a 2nd term, Joselita Taniga for a 2nd term, Raquel Vega Gonzalez for a 1st term, Megan Hussey for a 1st term, Chelsea Varnum for a 1st term, Carlos Benson Martinez for a 1st term, Dina Stoltz for a 1st term, Janet Romero Christensen for a 1st term, Molly Ruff for a 1st term, Terry Ann Cabin for a 1st term, and Michaela Todd for a 1st term.
Okay. So any other questions, colleagues? So we had a motion and a second to appoint those folks to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council. So I guess we can poll now.
Excellent. Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Humbertston?
Aye.
Commissioner Savas?
Aye.
And Vice Chair Schrader?
Aye, it is approved. Great. So thank you, members of the Budget Committee, for indulging us for a few minutes. And Gary, I am going to hand it over to you to start us off.
Thank you, Vice Chair Schrader. This is the monthly Budget Committee meeting for Tuesday, October 20th. 4 of our county commissioners are present. Chair Jim Bernard is out of the office today, and Vice Chair Schrader is chairing the meeting. With that, I will ask Elizabeth Comfort, the Finance Director, to take it away from here. So please go ahead, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Gary, and good afternoon, Budget Committee members and commissioners. We are in our 3rd month of our Budget Committee meetings monthly, and today we also again have Sandra Montoya, our Budget Manager, with us, and I am turning this meeting today over for her to lead us through the agenda and through the topics. And I believe Sandra and Blaze, you have access to your slide deck for today's presentation as well.
Yes.
Great. Okay.
So can we start with introductions, though? I'll let.
I was wonder about that. So,
Thank you.
so I'm going to start. Vice Chair Commissioner Schrader. Somebody take it off.
I'll do it. So Commissioner Humberstone.
Ken Humberston, County Commissioner.
Commissioner Fisher.
Sonia Fisher, Clackamas County Commissioner.
Commissioner Savas.
Paul Savas, Clackamas County Commissioner.
Our public committee members, Wilda Parks,
Wilda Parks, citizen from Milwaukee.
and Tom,
Tom Feely from unincorporated North Clackamas County, citizen member.
Jan,
Citizen member from Sandy, if I can outspeak someone's dog.
thank you, Jan. Sean Caldwell and Ann Lee were not able to be here today. Thank you.
All right, so I think we're ready to roll then.
Very well. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for allowing us to come before you. And we have a very full packet. I hope you had an opportunity to review. We're going to go over it this afternoon, and I'm going to make a strong effort to pause along the way because it's rich content, and we want to give you the opportunity to chime in, ask your questions, and give feedback. So the first item that we have on our agenda is outcome-based budgeting. And we've been talking about outcome-based budgeting, or the introduction of outcome-based budgeting, for a couple of months now. It's been in the works, and I'm very excited to tell you that it's here. That process, we are kicking it off. And so I want to just take a step back and walk us through really quick what outcome-based budgeting is. And very simply, it's a budgeting process, and it links the desired results of the BCC priority areas. The process allocates funding to what is most important and delivers value. It uses community input to communicate transparent budget along with results to the residents. And it shifts the annual budget debate from what do we cut to what do we keep. The plan is to transition to outcome-based budgeting over the course of 2 fiscal years. Phase 1 is what we're in now. We are laying the foundation through the new OpenGov software, budgeting software, and we're setting the framework within that software. The next couple of months, we will be reviewing the community priorities from the most recent survey. We're going to be aligning and prioritizing the department MFR programs with the priority areas set by the BCC. We're going to be allocating available general funds by the priority areas. And of course, we're going to be training all of our staff on the department, on the new chart of accounts, and on the new OpenGov system. The second phase, which will begin next fiscal year, so fiscal year 21-22, during that fiscal year, it's going to be a deep dive into the process. It's going to include more in-depth community engagement. It's going to include establishing indicators and developing a result process for budgeting. The endeavor, it's quite an undertaking, and it aims to deliver a transparent budget process that is reflective of the community priorities. So I just gave you in a nutshell what it is, and I want to give an opportunity for your questions and comments.
Any questions?
Are we using the raised hands thing in Zoom,
Yeah,
or do you want us to
believe
do something else?
I'm not sure I can see the raised hand, Gary. You're going to have to
Yeah,
help me.
Can't either.
Christina will call on everyone. If you will please raise your hands in the chat, use the raise hand function, and Christina will call.
Okay.
Wilda is first.
Yes, thanks. And thanks for your overview, because that answered some of the questions that I have. But let me just kind of review my notes real quick and see, what were the others. So I take it from this that you are going to take into account the community surveys, both starting with this year and then moving forward. So it would seem that that would also mean that the County Board of Commissioners would have to, or would eventually change from the I can't think of the acronym, but anyhow, the goals that they're using now to perhaps a different set of goals. And so I'm interested in that, how that transition happens. And the other thing I wondered, and I think for the budgeting process, it's really important, is will all the departments be moving forward with this at the same time? Because in the past, when we've changed the way that we budget and looking at, you know, programs and outcomes and managing for results and the performance Clackamas and all that, some departments have been on board the first year, some not till the second, and a couple of them I think finally came along maybe in the third or fourth year. So I was wondering about that. It would be beneficial if all of the departments were coming on together, but I don't know how that would work staff wise. So I'm interested in that.
Okay, so I
Yeah.
believe, oh, Elizabeth,
Oh, I was just gonna, that's a great question, Will, because we do want to hear from our residents of the county, and we will be aligning their goals with the commissioner's goals. So there'll be input, the community surveys and the feedback that we get will be input into the commissioner's direction and performance Clackamas goals that we do have set up at this time.
Well, and along those same lines too, if there, you know, we're talking about community goals and commissioners' goals, but we also have a number of programs that are important and inherent to Clackamas County that would need to continue. So they might not be on the BCC goal list and they might not be on the community goal list, but they're nonetheless important kinds of things. Can I make the assumption that those would, if they're valuable enough, that those would continue? I don't know what those might be offhand, but I'm sure there are many of those.
I can answer that. There are requirements of county government, mandated functions we perform that the state or federal government requires. So those obviously will continue regardless. But ideally, everything is aligned together. And if I interpreted your first part of your question, Will, that we are not getting rid of the board's performance Clackamas goals. Those are not disappearing, but we're going to align the public input and your input with the board's goals. And all departments now have a performance Clackamas or MFR plan, 100% as of July 1st this year. So there's no more staggering or wondering. Every department has a plan, which is great news. Thank you.
Okay, and Commissioner Humbertson is next.
Thank you. Two things. On the first paragraph on page 4, I believe it is, you say the first phase will focus on making the foundational changes needed to align the metrics and budget processes, providing the corresponding training to department staff and developing a budget aligned with the broad priority areas. I was curious as to whether you've begun that training, and if not, when will you, or if you have, where are you in that process? Is question number 1. And then the second question is in this whole process, will we build in an ability to react to unforeseen circumstances that may challenge the prioritizations that we currently have in place?
okay, so right now where we are at in OpenGov is building the framework so that we can budget accordingly. One of the functional features in OpenGov is the ability to align the program budgets to the priorities. So as departments are building out their budgets, they will be able to identify which primary priority their program serves. That will enable us to provide reports, timely information to the board as to how much we're spending, what we're spending, when we're spending. It won't get to the result of how successful is that program. That is going to be more a function of year 2, but that is what we are calling the alignment, is the identification of a programmatic budget to the board's priorities. And the training will begin once we have finished establishing the framework in OpenGov. Right now, we are still in the loading, we test, we validate, we do some more tweaking. That is still the process that we are in currently. And then I
You're
believe.
basically putting the systems in place now, and then you will begin the training, is what you're telling me.
Correct.
Okay. And then the second question was, how do we build into this process the ability to react to unforeseen circumstances and possible necessity of changing priorities because of those unforeseen circumstances?
Well, I guess my off the cuff remark would be through contingencies. So just the ability of budgets to absorb changes, much like the COVID, that we're undergoing now. There's normal budget things, that operating budgets that we can't do. And so we're having to switch gears and spend money in different places. So I think that's my off the cuff remark. And then the second would be contingency.
Thank you.
I'd like to add too, Sandra, I want to toot her horn for her. She is lining up trainings for the kickoff with all the departments. They start later this month. We're calling them finance budget summits. And so each department will have a personalized opportunity to meet with Sandra and learn about the outcomes-based budgeting and what that is going to entail, and get a deeper dive into the process. So that is going to be the kickoff for the training, which is learning how to do the outcomes-based budgeting, as well as learning the software. So it's going to be a multi-stepped training program going on over the next many months.
Thank you.
The next person is Tom Feely.
Thank you. I have a question about the board priorities. Unfortunately, I don't have them in front of me. Do you feel, Elizabeth and Sandra, the board priorities are detailed and expansive enough to compare and evaluate every program in the county? Because I recall the number one program in this community survey was law enforcement, and I don't recall law enforcement being a specific board priority, for example. So I'm just trying to see how you actually implement it, given the established board priorities, or were you going to circle back and do more work on those?
So I'll take a stab at it first.
Sure.
The board priorities are pretty broad. And I think that is, and that's the way they're meant to be. So they can encapsulate, the majority of undertakings. And so we feel fairly confident at this point that we will be able to align the programs with the priorities. Part of our homework that we're doing right now is establishing criteria so that we can help the departments identify the primary, we're calling it the primary priority, because there's going to be lots of programs that may fit across more than one priority, but the goal is to align it with the primary priority. And I believe that because the goals or the priorities are pretty broad, I think that it can be done.
Okay, they are broad. That's my recollection. I'm wondering how you get to a specific funding level within a program that may fit a priority. I mean, it seems very challenging to me at this time, just taking what is currently existing. Anyway, my other question is the citizen survey, which was not scientifically done. It was done on a volunteer basis, self-selection. So are you planning on refining that, going with that? Or are you going to do any other community outreach? I mean, I do see it in year 2, but the way we've talked about the financial forecast is that we're going to make some fairly heavy financial decisions on reductions this upcoming process, and that's before you have any sort of robust citizen input into the process.
So my immediate answer is and you're going to hear later on in this presentation, the tax roll information. I don't know that we know the full results of the impact, the revenue impacts. And so I can't say for certain how deep, if any, the reductions will be. So I think that's probably the first response. The second is, at this point in time, I would need to do more research before I'm comfortable answering the community survey question that you have. I know that OpenGov has a robust community input platform that we will be leveraging. But today's task, or this year's task, is to kick off OpenGov in conjunction with.
No, yeah, and I understand that. In the conversation we had previously, I understand your staff can't do everything. But if indeed, as you know, we've talked several times previously, we're looking at major reductions. I mean, putting off citizen input until a year after that's done just doesn't seem to jive too well for me. So I will note it as a concern.
Yeah, on the survey, Tom, there was a scientific survey, and that's what's in the packet. That was done this January or February, a scientifically based telephone survey. And we did an online unscientific survey. There's two different surveys that occurred.
So this was a random sample?
It was a demographically based survey of the residents of Clackamas County. Yes, 500 sample of 400 people to get that demographic.
All right. Okay.
And our Public and Government Affairs Department is going to collaborate, of course, with Finance team on NU committee on what that outreach looks like going forward.
Yeah, okay, that's good. I mean, that seems appropriate. And it should be more than just us, because I mean, we kind of get it when it's all tidied up and wrapped with a bow on it. So, all right, thanks.
Next up is Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I think really if we kind of step back, and not so to speak, partake in great amount of detail. I have comfort with what is being proposed, but I do want to just say that maybe the wording might lead people to think a little bit differently. So for example, I mean, when we use the word align, and we're going to align our priorities with the survey results, I think it has to be, I would assume that if you wanted to somehow equate that to funding levels, you'd have to have a completely different survey with a completely different set of questions and to a detail. But I know we're not doing that. But I've always felt that the survey informed rather than aligned per se, because really, if the concept, as staff said early on, is not, well, in the packet anyhow, it's not to talk about or spend time on what we cut, but more about what we prioritize or fund or keep. I think the word was keep. Mm-hmm. So I think that's accurate. I think if we were to kind of do an open survey right now and put all the different services out over there, for example, and people picked, should we prioritize forest firefighting? Right, I'm sure it'd rank really, really high, but that's something we really don't do, right? That's really for somebody else. So I'm just using that as an example. I know that one anomaly. I don't know which survey it was, Gary. Maybe you remember, but when we had the company who did the survey, they said that unusually, this is during COVID times, that parks ranked way higher than ever ranked on the survey. And I just took a guess that was possibly because a lot of people are out trying to recreate, sitting at home, not being able to do anything, COVID, so on. That may have been a factor, but there are sometimes anomalies where something rises to the top at a certain time. But again, I think overall, just to wrap it up, is that I don't necessarily think that really boils down to that we put the highest funding priority or funding levels in any specificity towards any one thing. And again, the survey does not cover all the different things that we do. So is it better to use the word inform rather than align? I don't think that we're going to be conflicted or doing contrary to what a lot of that, but I'm just going to throw that question out. Inform versus align, or is it both?
I think that you may be right, is that the surveys inform.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, because I think align might confuse people.
We can certainly make that change.
Oh, very good.
Okay, next up is Jan Lee.
Yes, my questions were about the survey and they got answered as we moved along, so I'm good.
Thank you.
I don't see any other hands.
Okay, then we will move on to the next item. And that is the debt issuance results and the proposed saving strategy. In August 20th of this, so basically 2 months ago, the county issued 47 million in full faith and credit debt at an interest rate of 0.96 for a 20-year period. Full faith and for those of you who may not know, means that it's debt that is backed by the general fund. The debt had three main purposes. It was to refinance 2009 debt for the sheriff's building remodel. It was to refinance 2012 debt issued for PDX Milwaukee Light Rail. And it was to issue 20 million in new money for road improvements. The refinancing.
Let me just clarify. It was, it's a facility
Road
building
facility.
for roads. Yes.
Yes, thank you. The refinancing is going to save the general fund and on average $564,000 per year. And the question that we are recommending an answer to is, do we take advantage of that annual savings to set money aside for a balloon payment that is going to happen in fiscal year 27-28? That balloon payment was built into the original 2012 PDX Milwaukee Light Rail debt, and it is also built in to the refinancing. So in fiscal year 27-28, 7.3 million will come due. So the options are do nothing, and we program that savings into normal operations, and which means that we will have a big problem, 7.3 million of a problem in fiscal year 27-28, or we can do option 2, which is to move the full transfer as if the original debt was still in place. And I should say this, the general fund transfers the money to the debt service fund. So that's why we talk about a transfer. It's done in 2 separate funds budgetarily. And so option 2 would have us transfer the full amount to that debt service fund and reserve that difference of roughly 564,000 per year into a line called reserve for future debt service. The pros of this option is that we reduce the gap. We would set aside roughly 4.8 million in savings over the next couple of years, and we would reduce that problem, that fiscal year 27-28 problem, to 2.5 million. The con is that that's 564,000 that we won't have available in the general fund for operating and for programming. The third option, as we roll forward, is that we annually set that 564,000 aside. Oh, hang on, I'm sorry. I lost my place.
Well, can I back up, Sandra, real quick on option 2? One of the cons also is that we would have to treat those, that reserve, and it would be taxed as you know, with the arbitrage rules. And so we could set it aside in a debt fund, but then we would have to pay taxes on that. So that's another negative to that one.
Yes, thank you very much for calling that out. The third option is that we annually set that aside in the general fund in a reserve that we would just broadly call reserve for the future. It would give more latitude to make use of those funds for other things. And it could be anything really, the capital replacement, the courthouse, PERS, technology replacement, but it would be available, including for paying down this debt in fiscal year 27-28. The con of this option is the lack of specificity for the purpose or of the purpose of this funds may make it more susceptible to use. The recommendation that we are putting forth is that we go with option 3. We believe it gives the most amount of latitude while still being fiscally responsible and planning for the future so that we minimize the impact in fiscal year 27-28. Any questions on the memo and what we just discussed?
Commissioner
Yeah.
Savas?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. Well, I don't disagree. I think option 3 is viable, and I don't know if it's appropriate to in our reserves and contingency amounts or on the budget somewhere to have a budget note that's a reminder of this pending 2028 payment, balloon payment. And that way there's a reference to it, you know, that we're going to, or that we need to deal with it, and therefore that those reserves or contingencies can't just be willy-nilly spent out and depleted and not having any room for some of the big upcoming obstacles we have in the future. Would that be appropriate?
So having that level of specificity would actually open that reserve up to an arbitrage calculation.
Okay.
So
Right.
while we could certainly make notes on our end, and actually I did think about your question, so I appreciate that. And that is, we will be within the 5-year forecast window with this reserve. So if we did that in our notes on the 5-year forecast, we will certainly be calling it out because that debt service payment, when it comes due, will require a big transfer. And so we will be able to keep it on the radar.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Humberstone? And I'm sorry, I accidentally muted you.
Thank you. Actually, Commissioner Savas asked the exact question I was going to ask, so I'm good to go. Thank you.
I don't see any other hands.
Okay, so the next step is that we would we're going to review the policy, I should say. And the next step is taking it to the BCC for consideration. So with that, we're going to roll into the contingency and reserve policy. So this item, the county already has contingency and reserve policies. There's just a few policies where things are spoken of differently, and this is we tried to make this a very comprehensive policy that had all of the elements and all of the pieces, including definitions and clarification for what things were and how we get to them. And this policy does apply best practices from the Government Finance Officers Association, as well as consideration of budget law and what we can and can't do with the budget year over year. So I'm going to skip the definitions, but we can certainly go back to them if we need to, but we're going to dig into the policy guidelines. And the first thing that we would call out is the contingency is a comprehensive place for all contingencies across the entire county. The policy previously focused largely on the general fund, and this policy actually calls out the general fund, the enterprise funds, all other funds, and still gives the board the latitude to make exceptions by resolution. So if the business needs of a fund set a different level for contingency, then that could be brought to the board as a contingency item. The recommendation for the general fund is 90 days. That is higher than what we have seen in the past. Normally that's at about a 45-day. And I've got to tell you, as a budget manager, I have been opposed to having contingency that low in Oregon. So my origin is California, and in California we had property tax and we had sales tax. We had a more diverse revenue base, and having a 45-day reserve was more adequate when there is diversity in a revenue base. But in Oregon, we are so dependent on property tax that only comes in once a year. So for that reason, everywhere that I have worked, I have said that those days of operating have got to be increased to allow for us to adjust when necessary. And then lo and behold, we have a year with a pandemic and, you know, a fire emergency. And we're struggling because the pandemic happened in March and we don't have data. You know, it's just now that the data for property tax is coming in. So I have a real life example of those reserves should be higher to protect the government, to allow us to operate and adjust. So the recommendation is the general fund at 90 days or 25%, enterprise funds at 60 days or 17%, and then all other funds at a 45-day target or 12.5% of their budget. Any questions on that? Okay, thank you. I
Commissioner
needed to
Sa-
take that breath.
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Savas has a question.
Yeah, so I'd imagine if we did do that, we're gonna have to set aside some money to actually build to that amount, because we're not even close to having that. So that might take a few years to actually to build up to that amount. So I agree. I know I don't, I say this jokingly. I know that Martha talked about the asteroid that might hit, but I'm actually been focusing either frankly on a Cascadia or, God forbid, Mount Hood, but exploding. But I'm just concerned really about what other unforeseen disaster we have, and the fact that we're dealing with 2 this year alone. So complete agreement. Thank you.
And it looks like Tom Feely has a question.
Yeah, I would agree with Commissioner Salas if that's something to get to that amount you definitely need not to do in 1 year, that you're going to have to aspire to that over a several year period. And I kind of don't think of that as a contingency, but more of a reserve, like an emergency reserve. So I don't know, maybe we're just using different language.
And I think that is a very important distinction. In budget law, contingency can be used in the same year as the need arises.
No, I understand that.
Yeah, it's just that reserves require a declared emergency. So certainly in this year, the use of reserves would be allowed by budget law. But normally, there may be other situations that occur that to the county may feel like an emergency, but if it wasn't a declared emergency, it would not qualify for usage.
All right. Yeah, I guess my budget experience is to make it a little more difficult to get at. I mean, not impossible, but not too easy. And then I would you haven't gotten to the next page. I'll just say it while I've got the floor. Instead of emergency, maybe I'd expand that to include like counter-cyclical economic events. Because it seems like over the last 20 years or so, what's really hit the budget are the various recessions, and that it's not like a declared emergency, like a disaster, an earthquake or flood, but they're certainly fairly frequent, and can take a pretty substantial impact, certainly on the state budget as well as the counties.
And that is absolutely a fair use for contingencies. So bolstering up the contingency would really add to the flexibility.
Yeah, I was just suggesting we include that in the narrative, or in the policy itself.
Okay. And we can circle back, Member Feely, and identify where you're recommending that. Or if you know now, you can let us know and we'll make note of it.
Well, I was looking at the top of page 9 where it said use of reserves. It says emergency event. And I think maybe that needs to be expanded, because I think we think of emergencies as declared emergencies, like a FEMA type emergency.
Got it.
as
Okay.
opposed to something that's happening on the national level with the economy, which is, not every year, but it's certainly on a cycle.
Got it. And I don't know, do you feel like it would be encapsulated in item number C2 that says planned use, where we program it as a part of the budget?
Well, if you know about it during the budget, I mean, I've been involved in various years of mid-year cuts when we didn't see it coming or we didn't see the severity of it.
Okay. And we can mull that over and see if we can expand that wording.
That's fine.
So
Commissioner
please.
Humbertson?
Yes, I suspect the answer is no, but have you developed a timeline yet? And if you haven't, when would you give us a timeline on how much you would want to put in on any given year to ultimately achieve the objectives that you have outlined?
Well, so the next process is to move this forward through the policy committee and then ultimately to the board. My hope is that as this progresses, that we will get to a point of having the books closed so that we can have some hard numbers to share, and at that point analyze where we're at. Because right now, not having the books closed, I hesitate to put numbers out that will ultimately change. But that is the plan, is that as we roll forward and as we get to the next 1 or 2 pages, you'll see the plan for getting there that I think is a viable plan. So if you'll be patient with me for 1 minute, we're going to get to, I think, your answer. Thank you. Okay, so the next category is reserves. And the reserves are just being strategic about the future. We can have categories of required reserves for things such as debt or contracts or grants, anything that, again, has a contractual requirement for setting aside would have the first position in the reserve category. And then second would be designated reserves. So it would be like we talked about in the previous item with the debt. It's a reserve for the future, and it can be general or it can be specific. So we're breaking the reserves up into those 2 categories, and then we go on to item C, which says how do we use reserves? So again, not contingency, because that we said was restricted by budget law, and we already had the mechanism to move contingency as needed in the budget year through a resolution. But this item C is actually using the reserves, which is limited by law to only emergencies, or if we can plan for it, then we program it into the subsequent year's budget. And those are perfectly legitimate uses. Now we're going to get to item D, which Commissioner Humbertson, this answers your question, and that is how do we add to reserves? And the answer is over time with one-time money. And the plan right now is, as we have savings at year end, that we designate how those savings will be allocated. And it's first of all to meet the contingency requirement that we've set up above, and we measure that as we go. And once we've met that target, then we distribute it to the following categories. And the first one would be to technology and facility projects, to building replacement funds. Member Feely, I would categorize the fleet that could be in that bucket for replacement of items. The second would be setting some aside for unfunded PERS liability. And the third would be 25% to allocated projects or pilot programs or innovative ideas that was one thing that we learned or are learning that is very important in outcome-based budgeting. It's incentivizing the departments to save by making funds available for innovative projects that they may have that might not otherwise get funded in the normal course of budget operations. So that's the plan for how we build up the contingency and reserves over time. I feel that this plan really serves a great purpose because we're not taking from the departments up front through the budget process. We're not limiting the departments in any way, but we are saying if there are savings on the back end, then this is how we would distribute those savings to build up for the future. So, and really, I just covered what the process and procedures are. It would be at year end that we would identify if there are any savings, and if there are, that we would go through the calculations and identify how we fill each of those buckets, whether that be contingencies, reserves, or those special project reserves. And we would bring that to the board for approval. So that wouldn't just be done automatically, but it would be a process where the board would have a chance to review, consider, and approve. Any questions?
Not this time.
I'm not seeing any questions.
Okay, so not seeing any questions, then the next step would be to have this policy roll through the policy committee and eventually to the Board of County Commissioners. And I thank you for your time on this topic. I think this is really important, and I think it's going to be huge to solidifying the financial future of the county. Okay, so Blaze, if we can go to 5A, and if you could pull up Assessor Little's document. And Christina, if you don't mind, I believe Assessor Little is probably in the waiting room.
She is, yeah.
Okay.
Just promoted her. She should be in any second.
Thank you.
Okay, she's here. Tammy, if you want to, oh, there you go.
Hello, everyone. Commissioners and Budget Committee members, thank you for the opportunity to update today on the 2020 property tax roll. We certified the roll on October 12th, and we have imposed $962 million for all taxing districts. That's an increase in taxes this year of 4.47% over last year. Property tax statements are going to be mailed out this Thursday and Friday, October 22nd and 23rd. That nearly 5% increase in tax is due to new construction, Measure 5's 3% growth on assessed value, new money measures, and district bond levies. Real market value grew in Clackamas County 5% this year, and that continues a growth trend that started in 2013. It was slightly lower this year than it has been in the past few years. To date, residential real estate market is doing well, and as of January 1, development continued around the county. That included 35 new subdivisions and just over 1,300 new homes built, all of which contributed to the $1.4 billion added to assessed value in 2020. Assessed value also grew by 5% from that statutory 3% and other exceptions to the Measure 50, such as new construction. Measure 5 compression grew from 12.1 million to 13.1 million, primarily in the school category. Some general observations about the tax roll this year: approximately 34,000 county properties have some savings as a result of the Measure 5 tax limits. Approximately 110,000 properties have tax increases between 1% and 3%. 45,000 properties increased greater than 3%, and nearly 14,000 had a decrease in their tax. 9% of properties this year paid on market value rather than their maximum assessed value. And this is a lower number of properties paying on market value than during any time in the past 15 years. I just want to let you know that we include an insert with all of our tax statements. It addresses payment options, Dropbox locations, current issues, the appeals process, and all of this information is available on our website, including that insert, tax statements for current and prior years, summaries of each tax roll. Our website also includes the dollar image that shows where tax dollars are used to support local services, such as emergency and fire operations, public safety, water, transportation, and social services. And the last update I want to give you is that we have 2 virtual town halls planned this year on November 10th. We create a presentation to help taxpayers understand Oregon's complicated property tax system and answer their questions. We do strive to ensure the citizens and taxing districts in the county can have confidence in their property tax system and receive high quality customer service. We believe this helps build public trust through good government. So we are frequently asked questions about impacts to current events. So what you see before you is we've included our press release to you, which was released this morning. I should have mentioned that, but you also see the impact statement that I prepared. The information is based on data that is available today, and it may change, as you know, and any additional impacts that are unknown at this time could affect this as well. As far as COVID affecting the 2020 property tax roll, our assessment date is January 1. And for the current tax year, 2021, that was prior to the start of the pandemic. So any impact attributable to COVID occurred after January 1 of 2020, and value on this year's tax roll was not affected. As far as future impacts, and these are just potential, we don't know. What we do use is historical information. So on January 1 of 2020, we had a strong market with historically low interest rates and low inventory. And today, residential markets remain strong, and the current indications do look favorable for January 1, 2021. As far as commercial properties, in 2020, they were mostly flat, and there were some exceptions. However, value may possibly be impacted on those types of properties starting in 2021 due to loss of income, rental revenue being down. This also could increase the number of appeals on those types of properties. Property owners, residential property owners under financial stress may appeal as well, or take a closer look at their values. Multifamily may also see a rise in appeals due to rent controls and eviction moratoriums. Right now, before the Department of Revenue, there is an argument under consideration for COVID as an act for property damage or destruction. Don't know the result of that. Some of the other impacts to this pandemic have been that our processing of the tax roll has been greatly affected, and we're very paper centric. So the need for improved technology has been there, but this going through this has accelerated that. For the wildfire event, Oregon statute allows for a proration of taxes for damaged or destroyed property by fire or an act of God. If the reduction in market value on the damaged property drops below the assessed value, then on a monthly proration, that is either refunded if it's been paid or it's canceled, that amount of tax. The taxes to date, we have 114 affected properties that have known destruction, and on those properties are 62 dwellings and 215 outbuildings. The initial estimate of prorated tax for those properties is about $91,000. So as bad as that it was, we had less impact on that than some of the other counties. There are also about 12 additional properties that have damaged structures, but the extent of that damage is currently unknown. And all of these affected properties are going to require some level of inspection to determine the extent of the damage or the destruction, and for us to be able to process the applications for these damaged or destroyed properties. Potential future impacts, again, really unknown, just kind of looking at history. We do know that property values will be adjusted for January 1 on the damaged or destroyed property, and being so close to that date, it's not likely that repairs or rebuilds will be very far along. Potential value loss for a district, it really is unknown, but probably going to be minimal, particularly for the larger districts. There's also potential legislative changes, and we really don't know the outcome or what they will be. There is one possibility or discussion at looking at the proration calculations and who qualifies. So, the outcome of that could be requiring us to redo some of the work we've already done, and that impacts our work. And then third question that I get a lot right now is on the revenue collections and the impact thereof. What we do know is the third trimester collection for 1920 was in May of this year, May of 2020, and it had a very slight drop in collection from May in the prior year. The collections for the fiscal year ending June 30th were consistent with what prior year's collection rates have been. And as of the close of the fiscal year on June 30th, we were at 98.4% collected. The prior June 30th, we were at 98.5%. So again, very slight difference. We took a look at 5 years worth of data, and we were able to see that about 11% of property taxpayers pay in the installments, either 2 to 3 installments, November, February, and May. And the other 89% of taxpayers typically pay in full on November 15th. 45% of those are paid by lenders from their escrow accounts. Historically, the collection rate is at about 88% each year on November 30th, which is consistent with approximately 89% of properties being paid in November. It is possible that some taxpayers will pay in the installment program. Well, I'm gonna wait till the future impact, sorry. We don't really know. We anticipate that collections will be consistent with what they've been in the past, but we don't really know for sure. One good thing is that we are making distributions weekly now, and we will through November. Throughout the rest of the year, it's done monthly, but any significant collection impact will be known immediately. So by the end of November, we're going to be able to tell if this is consistent with history. And although this particular pandemic is unprecedented, we have had other times when we look to see what happened. And after the recession in 2008, it was very typical to our 88% collected by the end of November and 98% collected by the end of June. As far as potential impacts to revenue going forward, and this is what I started to say a minute ago, it is possible that some taxpayers, due to lower income, will start paying in installments. And what that will mean is just impacting the short-term distributions. It might lower the 88% rate for the end of November. Also, economic factors, including reduced income, lack of income, potential business closures, impact commercial values, all of those things could affect future distributions and collections and assessed value. Appeals also could affect distributions and certainly would affect our future workload. So that is my presentation. I don't really, I wish I had, I believe that the collection rate is going to be similar, but truthfully, we just don't know until we get those numbers coming in. I mean, it could be slightly less, it could be very similar, and we expect that it will be actually, but until we have the data, truth is we don't know.
Mhm.
I think it's good to know that by the end of November, which is not very far away, we will have a strong indicator of how, well, we will know what the collection rate is. And that happens every year. You know, the districts receive their money in October and November, and then we distribute monthly after that, but the dollar amounts are much lower than when they get that initial funding that they operate on all year, including the county.
Not seeing any questions.
Well, it's nice to see everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tammy. And you know, I think your data and your information is really good, and we just are in a wait period right now to see what's going to happen in another 30 days. Our next, if there are no questions about this report, doesn't look like or sound like there is, we can continue on. Yeah. So what we have here, what we sent out was just some pages from our community survey actually it was presented to our Board of County Commissioners in July. And what we're looking at is where do we want the general fund dollars, you know, to go? And so we wanted to show you where they currently go compared to where the input from our survey results came back. And Blaze is doing a comparison, a crosswalk from this list comparing to where our budget dollars are going. So as you see, law enforcement is the third one there, 94%. But what is that law enforcement, right? What component is it? But it ranks very high as very valuable. 75% said very valuable. And we know about 75% of our general fund dollars do go to law enforcement. Do you want to continue scrolling down, Blaze? So these are some areas that we'll be looking at. And then what we did is we drilled down another page that we shared with you earlier is the funds. Go ahead, or the departments. Go ahead and keep scrolling there. So here we have, where are the general fund dollars? Who are they supporting? What departments? So we have 133 million or a million, and so this is the outlay. And then if you go to the next one, this shows by program. And the reason we wanted to share by program is because of our outcome-based budgeting. We're going to be focusing on the programs, and as Sandra showed us earlier, we'll be ranking each of these programs within the priority areas of the county's priorities. And so we can see how the dollars are being spent by those priorities. And we wanted to open this up to discussion. Any input, any thoughts from the committee on our, what we're doing right now with our general fund dollars and how they're being allocated or where they're being allocated?
Wilda has a question. And then Gary.
Did you call on me? I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Wilda.
That's all right. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, on this particular slide, I had a couple of questions. First of all, can you tell us a little bit more about what youth investment is? And the reason I'm asking that, I'm wondering if the measure that's on the ballot for youth, kids in Clackamas County will change any of what we're currently doing. And then my second question is, there are at least 3, I think maybe 4 areas on there where it's a minus figure instead of, you know, instead of an expense. So I take it that that means somehow money's coming back to the community. Casualty, people's soft support, AP, and facilities operators. Those are, they look like they're negative figures. Can you?
Yeah, and thank you, Wilda. We need to pull those off because what's happened in this year, we did some cleanup. And so the facilities, we had transferred additional funds to them for capital projects throughout the county. And we did a sweep through this budget process and pulled general fund dollars back into the general fund. And right now facilities sits in a different fund. And so we wanted to capture those back into the general fund. The one you see in AP and Office of the Director, some of those finance ones, I think those are credits where we actually, through allocation process, did not need the full amount of general fund direct because we were doing an allocation. So those, you'll see those cleanups drop off on future reports. And I'm sorry, can you go back to your first question on the youth program?
My first question was, with considering that the ballot measure that's for Clackamas County that's on the ballot right now about the Safe Kids ballot measure, when that passes, does it affect any of the expenses that we show here, especially under youth investment? I mean, I wasn't sure just what that meant, what it included, and so I wondered if that will change any when the measure passes and goes into effect.
I don't believe so. Gary, can you help me with that one?
Well, that's entirely up to you, Budget Committee. That's not the intent. It's not the intent to cut what we're already giving. The children's levy, if it's approved, is to enhance and do more services and programs. So no, as a staff, we were not going to propose to cut what our general funded programs may be, but that's up to you, Budget Committee, if you choose to do that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I remember that we'd had that discussion before and just wanted to double check back on that and just what those various items entail. So thank you.
And Administrator Schmidt?
Yes, thank you. If I may, I know you've already started, but to help tee up this conversation, if you could please go to page 13 on the slide deck. I'm sorry, it's not the assessor page. I guess it's there. It's the general fund list. Yeah, keep moving. Yeah, this page right there. Yes, this chart is golden. Thank you for staff for putting this together. So this is a list, just the total by department of how many departments receive general fund and how much they receive. As you know, Budget Committee, out of the $850 million county budget, only 133 is general fund, a very, very small portion. Of that, though, you can see exactly where the funds go as of this year. My own math is that, our surveys have said, you have said, law enforcement, public safety is the top priority. It is proven by the general funded programs of the departments that provide a public safety or a law enforcement service, and I'm counting sheriff's office, juvenile, district attorney, and corrections. They receive a total of $89 million in general fund, which is 68% of the general fund. So that's pretty good. You are demonstrating, in my opinion, the importance of public safety to Clackamas County. Of the actual numbers here, this is my analysis. Obviously, the sheriff gets the most general fund, followed by the district attorney, and health, housing, human services third, followed by juvenile, and then the assessor's office. And then everything else falls down from there in quite low amounts. So there's not a lot of wiggle room here on how you choose to spend that money. But every year, that's how we have the most conversation. How are you going to spend this $133 million? So with that, I just wanted to say this is a discussion point. Obviously, you're not making decisions today, and I'll give it back to Elizabeth and Sandra, of course. but we just want to kind of get your feel of things. Are we spending enough on public safety or not? Should that be the top priority or not? Where else would you like to spend these limited general fund dollars? There's not enough to go around. We still have expenses that outpace revenues. That has not gone away. So we've made significant cuts in general fund the last 2 fiscal years. It appears we won't have to take as much cut this upcoming fiscal year. When we first met with you in May, things looked dire, but they do not look as dire. The state budget cuts are not as deep as we thought. The COVID impacts, there is an impact, but it's not as deep as we thought. The wildfire impact has been added since we last met with you. All to say is it is not as dire as we thought, but we still do not have a structurally sustainable budget. That is still an issue to resolve. So I'm rambling here other than to say, look, we're here to brainstorm with you and to hear your strategic advice. So we're all ears to hear your counsel and thoughts as staff goes forward in preparing budgets for next fiscal year. Thank you for listening.
So with that is actually the bulk of our presentations. The
Yeah.
remainder of the packet are the dashboard items. Oh, go ahead, Elizabeth.
Oh, yeah. So what I wanted to add is the reason we talk about the general fund and not the other funds, as Gary pointed out, is that this is what we have control of. The other funds and the other, the revenue streams, the state, the federal, those are budgeted more specifically in those departments that manage those funds. And if those revenues come in less, then those expenditures are also reduced. And our outcomes-based budgeting is going to really help us fine-tune to understand where these programs are in our priorities for the county. So when we look at budgeting, we can be more focused and more intentional. But it would be great to, hear from you guys too, as what are you, I gotta fly here. What are your thoughts to move strategically in our priority, in prioritizing these dollars and our efforts?
Not seeing any hands. Yep, it doesn't look like any hands are being raised.
I'll raise mine. I can't find my raise your hand button. No.
Go ahead, Tom.
Generally, to answer the question, I'm fairly comfortable with the allocation that we made last year. I mean, obviously, there are areas that we'd like to spend additional money on, but we don't have it. But I'm fairly comfortable with where we ended up. I mean, I think the key will be what the forecast is for next year. I mean, if we have to cut, how much do we have to cut? And what is the service impact of that? I mean, it's hard to do it looking at a chart just full of numbers. I mean, we need to know, what the outcome, so to speak, will be of making reductions in some of these programs and who is impacted in the community and what other resources they will have. So that's what I would say at this point. But I don't think we are far out of whack. And I would bet if we compared this to other counties that we're probably not too dissimilar from other similar sized counties in terms of priorities.
Okay, it looks like Wilda has her hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I certainly agree with what Mr. Feely had to say. And, I've always kind of felt that a county, well, probably a city too, but at least, a county, the main purpose is to keep its citizens safe and keep them, able to move around the county. And H3S is, one of the most valuable services we have. So when we consider what we've allocated over the past to public safety and to transportation and to H3S, all of those kinds of things seem to fall right in place. And I'm like Mr. Feely, I'm pretty comfortable with things we did last year. I'm interested in how the conversation is going to go about how we can make this sustainable as we move into the future. So, I'm good with the fact that we spend the percentage we do on the various areas that we do right now.
Commissioner Humbertston? And Commissioner, you're on mute.
I agree with my colleagues. I think what we budgeted fits our objectives fairly well. It's very difficult to project ahead without knowing how much money we're going to have to spend on the next fiscal year. And I realize what I'm going to say is the opposite language of what Elizabeth wants to hear. But when I know how much money we have, I can then, and I'm just speaking for myself, then I can look at the general fund support by departments list and make a judgment call as to where we can cut. And I know that's not what she likes to hear, wrong language, but we essentially it's what you end up doing with the least negative impact on the services that we provide. But until we know what our income is, it's rather hard to speculate.
I'm going to answer that, and that Commissioner is why we're trying to totally reframe how we do budgeting in Clackamas County, because that's the old way. Show us the number how much we have to cut, and we'll just cut kind of surgically piecemeal. But staff is suggesting, I'm suggesting, with this outcomes-based budgeting, we're flipping that script. So instead, you and the community are telling us, staff, here are the priorities of Clackamas County government. Now find the money to fund those priorities. And if it's not a priority, we will reduce or stop funding that program. Thank you for listening.
Okay, Tom Feely?
Just a quick comment. So 2 weeks from tomorrow, there's going to be a new sheriff-elect in town. Yeah, I just hope that the new budget process is flexible enough for her to make any changes that she desires to in terms of changing priorities or allocation within the sheriff's office.
Yes, there will be, for sure.
Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, thanks. Gary, I really appreciate you bringing it back to Performance Clackamas and priorities and our strategic initiatives. And that's one of the great pleasures that I've had as a commissioner coming into a county that had this framework when I joined the commission, almost 4 years ago. So I think utilizing that process as the foundation for how we do budgeting is really, really important. The piece about safe, secure communities, as we know, is very important to our constituents. And I appreciate what Tom said about the new sheriff-elect. I think there's a lot of opportunities here. I know my conversations with the Peace Officers Association and with members from our community, there's a lot of consensus around what types of investments we need to be making, which may involve law enforcement not going on certain calls and shoring up more resources when it comes to people with mental health expertise. We've had the GO teams that have emerged out of COVID, which have been doing mental health calls, which have been, really healthy, wonderful outcomes for our community. And I do know my conversations with Under Sheriff Brandenburg, who will be our sheriff-elect, engaging more with community and what priorities are is also a priority of hers. So I think we have a lot of opportunities to engage with the framework that has been established. Really important to look at what those outcomes are. And I really appreciate hearing the budget committee thoughts and input on all of those initiatives. And that's something that we haven't put up on as part of this budget packet, but maybe when we meet the next time, we can also have that conversation, because it's helpful to us, because the Board of Commissioners we define those strategic initiatives, and hearing our thoughts from community members is ever so helpful.
Commissioner Savis?
Yeah, I'm going to try to keep my language consistent with what we're trying to do here. So I guess I'll pick on a department here. So I'll pick on transportation and development. And I know that $4.8 million that's sitting there, that there's other revenue streams that are not reflected that they receive for certain things like roads. So and maybe using that as an example, if we were, again, consistent with the language, what is it that we want to see happen or prioritize of that $4.8 million? I'm imagining that we can be at that point more surgical and say, you know, let's just say that $4.8 million is going towards planning, the planning department, permitting, and we want to spend more money on, you know, another program because that's a priority. Are we going to have that level of influence? So we're not just like saying more money here in this department, more money, but specifically what activity in that particular department? Will we have that opportunity?
Well, part of the outcomes-based budgeting model says that we will prioritize each of the programs or align the programs to each of the BCC priority areas. And then within each of those priority areas by department, we'll rank them. And that's part of the process that we're embarking on now, is coming up with that criteria to say if there's 10 in one department that fall under, you know, priority area 1, they'll rank those. And so depending on how the funding is for each of those programs, that's where we'll have the influence of, you know, we only want to do the top 5 because we have limited resources. You know, we'll look at, okay, how are we going to address, you know, the 5 that rank the lowest? And so that's how the dollars will influence, and your decision influence is how are these programs prioritized. So it's a twofold, but they need to go together.
Okay. So to simplify it to some degree, is that we will be selecting or the programs you want to see more emphasis on, and staff will be the surgeons to figure out where and how and what to make those adjustments.
No, I think it's the alignment first, then the ranking within each of the priorities, and then it's how far will the funding stretch within. So if you're thinking silos, columns, it's how far will that funding go? And we'll definitely have to separate dedicated funding within those priorities from general fund funding within those priorities. And you just fill that need until the dollars are done. And then you have to stop because you're out of money.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Schrader?
Yeah, I just want to say that I think one of the things that we're really going to have to do is be extremely self-disciplined with this. That once we set a priority, I know that we want to think there's a lot of fungible money out there. We can pivot quickly. I mean, I imagine with things like disasters, but I think we're going to have to be extremely careful as a commission not to, you know, at the last minute add suddenly a whole new priority that we haven't really vetted or discussed. And I think that's my comment is this is going to take extreme self-discipline. And once we come up with what we're saying we're going to do with a priority, we need to stick with it and not pivot unless it's something that is so different, like a COVID or a fire, that we have to kind of work with things. So I'm just going to encourage all of us to think about that a little bit. That's all I have.
Feely?
Just a quick question. Do you have any plans to bring a broader employee group or labor unions to the table when these programs are allocated to the various priorities and ranked?
Yes. So in the first year, the plan is to not use outcome-based budgeting for reductions. We will have to come up with kind of a lag or a bridge from one year to the next. But in the second year, the plan is to have the process inform what gets funded or not. And in that process is the broader discussion. So it is community engagement,
Okay,
it
that's good.
is teams. So yes, there will be the opportunity.
That wasn't clear to me before, so that makes me feel better. Thanks.
I'm not seeing any other hands.
So I think that wraps up our discussion, and we're closing in on the end of our budget committee meeting today. We did want to talk about future meetings, and I asked Gary if you would lead this discussion with us.
Yes, so budget committee members, back in April, May, when you last met, you had agreed that you would meet monthly because at the time we had predicted a dire, worse than expected budget scenario for Clackamas County. The good news is that has not come to pass so far. Knock on wood, and that's great news. The state budget cuts are not as severe as we thought. The COVID impacts, there is an impact, but because of the state reimbursement we're receiving, it's manageable. The wildfire impact is still in process. There will be an impact, but it appears we're able to cover that with our contingency and reserves. So all to say is things are not as dire as we thought. So I want to ask you, are these monthly meetings valuable to you, all of you, the commissioners and public members? Is it valuable to your time? Because if it isn't, and it's okay to admit that, we don't want to waste your valuable time. And then the question is, does the monthly meeting still add value? Should we go to every other month or go back to the quarterly, which is what we originally had been meeting? Want to ask just gauge your temperature on how you're feeling these are going. We did cancel last month because of some scheduling issues, but also, frankly, a lack of agenda items for you. We don't want to create work for you to fill your time. We want to have a valuable use of your time. So I just want to ask the question, are these monthly meetings still valuable for you? Yes or no?
Wilda?
I think today's meeting has been valuable for me. I hope it's been valuable for the others around the table also. We covered a lot of information that we hadn't specifically covered before. So I guess my thought would be today was valuable, but it would depend on what the issues are, what the discussion items are, how the agenda lays out. Some of the stuff, like some of the reports that we have in this month's packet, could in fact just be sent out to us, as a packet, emailed out, and doesn't really have to be any group discussion on. But when there's something as substantive as today's discussion, then I would say go ahead and meet. But I'd want to be sure that it had that kind of breadth to it. Thank you.
It's like Jan Lee's next.
Yes, I would be comfortable meeting every other month unless the staff feels that there's an urgent need to do otherwise. And I liked Wilda's idea of sending documents out without anticipating there needs to be a discussion on all the documents.
Any other
Commissioner
comments?
Savas?
I'm fine with that.
Like Commissioner Savas will be next.
Yeah, well, Gary, I heard what you said. I would say that
What?
I'm okay meeting that as necessary, as needed. I don't know what's going to happen between now and January per se with the holidays coming. Everything's gonna be kind of abbreviated, and but your point to we don't need to create work or try to find agenda items to bring to fill the gap. So I think as needed is satisfactory. And if that happens to be every other month or every 2 or 3 months, I'm fine with that.
Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, so I'm very sensitive to the workload of our finance staff because it appears to me that all of the tracking of all of the emergencies and everything that has to be done to make sure that we are doing everything correctly is an extra workload for our finance department. And I don't know, Elizabeth, if you want to shake your head yes or no, if that's a correct assumption. So I would suggest that we go, since we are not in a financial crisis right now, we go back to our normal quarterly meetings. And if there's anything that needs to come up before then we can call another meeting. But I would prefer going back to our regularly quarterly meetings. That would be my proposal.
Okay, I've kind of heard the whole range here. So
We got a thumbs up from Wilda, and I
Yeah.
think that was quarterly, back to quarterly. So
Let me throw this out. What if our next meeting was January? Because one, looking at holiday schedule. Secondly, there's really not there's not a lot that's going to happen between now and January. In January, we'll have a new chair of the commission, and it'll be important to get her and you up to speed of where things are at. What if we would wait till January? Unless there was something that was really urgent, we'd reach out. But could we kind of start there, the next meeting in January? How would you feel about that? With email updates as needed, of course.
yeah, I wanted to commit that we'll send out emails as soon as we have from our property tax collections, what those are, and any critical updates we can provide information timely.
Mm-hmm. Works for me for January.
Great. And then at that time, we can, as a group, you can decide if it's necessary. You can meet monthly, go back to every other month, or quarterly at that point in January, based on how things are playing out at that point.
Commissioner Savas has a question.
Yeah, I can support that, Gary. And I think looking forward beyond January, I think the discussion ought to be changing towards how do we prepare ourselves for the next budget cycle in the budget. So that ought to be the priority. How do we, what is the best timing? Is that quarterly, or is that maybe we meet in March and twice, thereafter, or whatever we think. But you're right, January might be a better time to kind of set that course.
Right. I'm seeing thumbs up and head nods of support for January as the next meeting of the full budget committee, with email updates between now and then to keep you posted. And of course, if you have questions or need of information at any time, please email any of the staff here and we will get that to you. Okay, thank you for that. Back to you, Sandra and Elizabeth.
All right, well, that is actually the entire agenda. We ran a little bit over, so we thank you for your time. And we will see you in January and email in between.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. And commissioners, we're still meeting, commissioners, so hang on.
Okay.
Okay. All right, great. So Commissioner, if you're ready, Chair, we'll move on to the next policy session.
Let's do it.
Okay, next is disaster debris removal, contracting, options, and strategy. We have Nancy Bush, Director of Disaster Management, to present. Is there anyone else, Nancy, you'd like in the room?
Yes, we need Dan Johnson and Evan Polk, please.
Okay.
Hey, Gary, can we just take like 1 or 2 minutes just to take a little rest, since that was a long time at the computer? And
yes,
I really need a restroom break, and I don't want to miss anything that Nancy and Evan is going to talk about.
Can we take a 3-minute break, everyone?
Thank you. That's all I need. Just give me 3 minutes.
Watch this here.
Well, we have a quorum.
Yeah.
Why don't we, we're back? Okay.
Yes.
So let's
Okay. We're back now. Disaster debris removal, contracting, options, and strategy with disaster management and guests. We only have 30 minutes for this session, but take the time you need because this is an important topic. So go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. So we are here to talk about debris again, which is a little bit of an extension from what we talked about this morning with the letter. So I'm going to give a little bit of a background here, and then I'm going to have Eben talk about the contracting process, which is what we're really here to have the decision on today. So FEMA has authorized public assistance for debris removal, which is under the wildfire and the wind declaration here for Clackamas County, as well as other counties here in the state. So the public right-of-way debris, which is basically along our county roads and is our trees that are putting our roads in danger. We have about 4,000 trees, and we're thinking it's going to cost around $4 million to get those trees down. A part of that is to be remembered that we would get up to 75% reimbursement for that, which means that the county would be paying 25% of that, which is $1 million. So FEMA has provided clear guidance for this particular work already and is eligible for reimbursement. There's also the private property debris, which we have not had any guidance from FEMA on that yet to say that if that is possible for us to do at the local level here in the state of Oregon or Clackamas County. And two things have to happen there. So FEMA first has to say that, yes, it's eligible and we would provide assistance with that. Our homeowners, of course, would have to go through insurance first as well, which also complicates it. If FEMA does say yes, you can work on this at the local level. And then our county commissioners also have to say, yes, we want to support that. Until FEMA says that it's even eligible for the state or for the county, there's no decision to be made there, but it is definitely a potential. So we want to continue to talk about that and keep that here in front of our commissioners. So we do have permission to do the household hazardous waste, which is going to be free of charge for anyone that signs the right-of-way entry for private property. And we are currently working on that right now. This past Friday was the date that all of the right-of-way entry forms were supposed to be signed and turned in to DEQ. We're still working on that a little bit this week, trying to get as many private property owners as possible to sign that. So that is a go, and that is 100% covered by the state as well as DEQ and FEMA. And there are no dollars here at the local level, except of course we're doing some management of that, which is going to be turned in to FEMA, excuse me, with our time. So for our private property, there's an estimated 111 properties that has lost one or more structures to the fire. Right now, we know of 62 homes that are damaged and destroyed. Of these, we estimate 37 are still stick-built homes, which means traditional homes, and 25 are manufactured homes. There's 214 outbuildings, such as sheds, pole barns, and other types of outbuildings. And then of course, we have a lot of vehicles that have also been burned on the properties. If FEMA authorizes public assistance for the removal of this debris from private property, it is the same 75-25 cost reimbursement that may apply. We just recently learned that the state is trying to get it down to a 10% for cost reimbursement, for us to pick up 10%. However, that has not been decided yet, and we do not have that information. So if every property owner with damage to structure participates and we get this program, the cost estimate is around $7 million for that cleanup. So what we want to talk about today is doing a contract strategy, because we're waiting on the state to see what they're going to decide. Are they going to help with the cost share? Are they going to pick up everything and then get reimbursed from FEMA for the 75%? So there are a lot of things that are still up in the air. But in Clackamas County, we are already ahead of the game somewhat, because we had a really strong plan in place before any of this happened. And what we would like to do is issue an RFP for a 5-year contract for debris removal in case we need it, so we get ahead of the game, because the faster we get the debris out of the way, the better off we will be. And for the trees and stuff, we have a lot of trees that of course are putting our roads in danger. And so we want to get out there as quickly as we can when decisions are made so that we can get the trees cleaned up. So we're looking at doing a contract that would be 5 years, because we can also do cleanup. If we have something happen 5 years from now that is related to the fire, we could use this contractor to help with that cleanup. And then it just puts us ahead of the game again. So, and if we go with the state, if the state provides something for us that says, and we say, yes, we're going to go with that, we can drop this contract. So I'm going to turn it over to Eben to talk a little bit about the contract and what we're looking at there and looking at our option A and B that we have here in your materials. Eben?
All right. Hello again, everyone. Good to see you. It's just been a few hours, I guess. So yeah, the decision we're asking for really here is, for your input with respect to the approach we would have been using anyway if we were moving forward on debris removal without state involvement. And so in essence, you can view this as a backup plan while we wait for more clarity from the state around what that option is going to look like. We're asking for your input on what staff could or should be doing behind the scenes to be prepared should the state process not work out in part, or maybe just not be something that is to your liking. And so imagine for the moment a scenario where we're going out on our own for this removal contract, and a decision that we want to bring to you here is two approaches. One is a little bit more open-ended. It's a 5-year contract for all debris removal services that we might need during the next 5 years. And then what we would do is, if we need to, we would put together task orders for that selected contractor to do specific jobs under specific disasters. So it gives us a lot of flexibility if we want to opt into private property debris removal later, or on a different emergency, or if we have a landslide or some event that's different than what we're dealing with today. We also see an advantage of that approach being that we might be able to attract some stronger contractors, because this would be a contract that we would be holding for the next 5 years as opposed to just for one event. So that's option, the first option. And the second option is just to focus our scoping and our work, again, as a backup option, focus more narrowly on the event that's at hand, which would be tree removal and then potentially also private property. So we feel there's a pretty strong recommendation for that first approach. Nevertheless, we wanted to get your input on that and make sure that what we're doing behind the scenes over the next 2 or 3 weeks is something that you would be comfortable with if we ended up needing to do some or all of this contracting on our own.
Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, so not dissimilar from my question this morning or clarification this morning, like, I think for the most part, you were talking about really the public land or the areas that's public, not the private properties. So from that aspect, I'm okay with that. It seems to me that the hazardous waste elements are probably more likely to happen on the private property than they are on the public property. Not necessarily, but I would assume so, right? Because we don't, yeah. So you're saying that, Eben, that this cleanup could last as far as 5 years?
No, what we're saying is essentially that some of the county contracts are on-call contracts, and we have those contracts last for a longer period of time, so we can activate those contracts when and if we need on specific events. So we're proposing that we put together a scope that would be for a 5-year contract that would be more flexible. We can pick and choose. Let's say we have a landslide 3 years from now. We have a contractor already on board who we can issue a task order under that contract to deal with the issue. That's what we're referring to when we talk about a 5-year term.
Okay, so let me just give you a hypothetical so I can understand this a little bit better as far as our strategy, and that is, so let's just say that we have a county road and there's a steep embankment on one side going up, and there's trees there. We need to remove them because they're going to fall on the road. So we hire a contractor. Let's say they bring out their equipment and they clear that all out of there. There's likely there's going to be some some earthwork, right, to get the ground base ready. Are we going to do anything proactively while they're there, or, you know, they're on site for, and maybe this now is not the best time for seeding, but if this does go on, I'm just kind of concerned about how we get ground stabilization. And is that included in the FEMA coverage to basically put it back into a condition in which it is stable?
So I'm sorry, Commissioner, I don't know that I have a good answer to your question. It sounds like you're asking about restoration and reseeding, for example, soil stabilization. I know that the debris removal contract would typically cover, let's say, the removal of trees in the right of way. Nancy, is this something that you have experience with, or Dan?
So I would have to take a look to make sure, and this is under category A, and see what they really do cover. It's been a while again since I've done this, but I don't believe it covers reseeding and restoration. But we will definitely check on that. And that's a question we can ask. I can ask my state partners, our state partners, but I don't believe it does.
But to expand on that, we have already been doing such work. And so if it is a reasonable period of the weather event of the given year, meaning the season, we would probably be proactively going out there and hydroseeding those sites that those debris actions occur on.
Right. I guess where I'm going with this is that my concern is let's just say, like my example, you know, you have an embankment on one side going down upwards. And then of course, on the other side of the road is going downwards. We don't do anything. The ground lets loose. There's a mudslide, and we wipe out a property downstream of the slide, or several properties. Is that a disaster all in itself, or is that still under the FEMA disaster? And basically, what are the financial consequences for the county? For us, if we were the lead, it wouldn't be the contractor's fault, I wouldn't imagine, but who would be on the hook for that?
So if you're asking if we had a mudslide, I mean, we have mudslides in the county all the time, and I guess I should let Dan answer this, but we're on the hook for that.
Yeah, under any of those scenarios, we're under the hook for that. Right now, the contract that Evan and Nancy are sharing with you is simply for the removal of those trees that are impacted by the fire. And so if we would have the responsibility to probably coordinate hydroseeding after those events, and to address any post-event dialogue around a landslide. I do think there's probably a discussion to be had with FEMA if and when that may occur, to see if it could be directly correlated to the mainland fire event.
That is correct.
You got the gist of my concern. I'm done. Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Commissioner Humberstone. And you're on mute, Miss Commissioner Humberstone.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the chart, and obviously hazardous trees on our land, we are responsible for no matter what. So even if FEMA doesn't come through, we're on the hook for $4 million, correct?
So yes.
I see Dan nodding his head.
I mean, so we're on the hook, you know, we will front the 4 million, and then we at least we get 75% back.
Is that guaranteed at this point?
As long as we do everything right, that is correct.
Okay. On the private
And we are
property,
doing, and Commissioner, I just want to say, we are doing everything to make sure we do it right. We have, you know, Dan's people are involved, my people are involved. We have people involved in finance to make sure we're doing everything by the book.
no, I'm not quarreling with that aspect of it. My concern is that using the trees as an example, we're on the hook for $4 million until or unless we have a contract from FEMA that says we're going to give you $3 million. And do we have that contract yet?
So it's not a contract. It is an approved declaration for category A. And yes, we do have that.
So can I take that as a commissioner? Can I take that to mean the money is guaranteed?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
we have been approved for category A in Clackamas.
That's where I'm trying to get to. And
yes, sir.
But there'd be a question around when that repayment occurs.
That's true, but we're guaranteed, yes.
Yeah.
I know, I've heard the expression, the check is in the mail. I get that.
Their mail takes 2 years sometimes, but yes.
Yes. And then the second question, my second one is the private property debris issue, and same question.
Okay, so for private property, first of all, we do not have approval from FEMA to do that yet. And even if FEMA does say yes, Oregon can do this, the county commissioners have to say we agree to do it. And there's the same issue. So first of all, those homeowners need to go to insurance if they have their insurance and and use that. Secondly, then after that, we would work with them and the insurance companies, which becomes very complicated if the commissioners have said yes. And yes, we would be out of the $7 million or whatever it may take until we get to 75% reimbursement.
Well, my concern is that, again, like the first one, if we're on the hook for $7 million, I don't want to be on the hook for $7 million until we are in the same category as the hazardous tree category, is what I'm trying to say.
Right, and I don't either. And we don't have that approval. That's why all of this, when you read the document too, it's like if it is approved by FEMA and if it is approved by our county commissioners. Because it's possible FEMA could say yes, and the commissioners say, no, we don't want to do that for these reasons. Or yes, we want to do it for these reasons.
Well,
But
obviously the desire to help the citizens who've been burned out is there. I think any of us would feel that we would like to do that. But so $7 million is more money than we've got. So the real question becomes: Is FEMA going to pay that $7 million? Because if they don't, that creates a real big budget problem for us. And I want to be assured that they're going to cover that cost if we engage in that action.
Yes, and I will say that anytime you start doing private property, it does get complicated very quickly. Yeah.
Okay, you understand my concerns.
I absolutely, sir, we do. And we have no intentions of doing anything without the commissioners understanding everything about these decisions and the decision you're making.
Show me the money. like the man in the movie said.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Evan, you had something?
Oh, just so two things. One, to this question of FEMA authorization for private property debris removal. We learned last week from the state that technically FEMA has not yet received a complete request for that assistance. And so we need to work more with the state, and the other counties need to work more with the state to clarify, okay, what is it that needs to happen for FEMA to officially receive a legitimate request to authorize that assistance. And then the second thing is just to focus us back if I could for a moment on the question at hand. Pretend for a moment that the state is not offering debris removal. Or that they are, but we want to have a backup plan in place in case things don't come together the way we would like to see. So that means we'll need to be prepared to do some debris removal on our own at a minimum of hazardous trees. What we're asking you for is, hey, should we keep the focus really narrowly on the scope of work in front of us today, or should we go with more of an a la carte? So should we do an RFP that results in an a la carte menu that we can pick from at any time in the next 5 years to handle a debris removal situation? Is that clear? That question we're asking, it's pretty narrow.
So with specific task orders that would have to be put forward to activate any aspect of that contract.
Well, if it results in a benefit to the county, obviously we'd want to give the staff the leverage, right, to make the best decision.
Yeah.
And that's not for us to make a call property by property, I don't think.
What's staff's recommendation? You want the flexibility? That would be a better way to go.
Yeah.
Yes, that is our recommendation, to go with the 5-year.
Okay. Then I don't know if anybody else, I'm okay with that.
Do you need a motion, Madam Chair?
I don't know, Gary, do we need a motion? Or just, I guess we need a motion, so.
I'll place the motion on the floor for purposes of discussion. I move to approve option 1.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any more discussion?
Commissioner Fisher has her hand up.
Okay.
Yeah, I put my hand up before we made the motion. So I just just to make a comment, I think it's more fiscally responsible to go with option B, especially since we would be responsible for landslides, and that's probably going to happen, unfortunately. So it just seems more prudent. And so that was going to be my argument in favor of this motion.
Great. Any discussion? Okay, let's call the roll. You're muted, Christina.
Man, every time. Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Humbertson,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
and Vice Chair Schrader.
Aye, it is approved. Great. Okay, Gary, we got anything else on the agenda?
Yes, we have one more session after this. So thank you, team. Well done.
Okay,
All
thank
right.
you.
All right, our last policy session is Clackamas Workforce Partnership Budget Presentation. We have staff from Business and Community Services and the Clackamas Workforce Partnership to present. As the room here, Cindy Moore from Business and Community Services kick it off. And Cindy, if you could please reaffirm, this is not a decision point today, right? It's just an information update and accepting report, but I'll let you state that. So Cindy, please go ahead.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Administrator Schmidt and Commissioners. Cindy Moore with Business and Community Services, Economic Development Division, and I'm very pleased to be here today with our friends from the Clackamas Workforce Partnership as they do their annual budget presentation. So for those in the audience that may not be as familiar as we are with the Clackamas Workforce Partnership, they serve as the fiscal agent for workforce development dollars that flow into our region, and are very well known as thought leaders and movers and shakers in the workforce world, and are fully integrated, I know, at least from our economic development team's perspective, with the activities that we embark on, and are also involved in some of the other county goals that the board has established. So the way that the Clackamas Workforce Partnership executes their work plan is through a partnership agreement, or in part through a partnership agreement that we have with them, and that is outlined in your packet today. Part of that partnership agreement, while it outlines the roles and responsibilities of both the county and CWP, part of that is to do an annual budget presentation that shows the sources and uses of the dollars that are coming into our region and highlights some of the partner activities with other organizations throughout the county. So with that, also I have the pleasure of serving as a board member on the Clackamas Workforce Partnership. And I just want to say from a personal perspective, it's just very rewarding to see the work that's being done on the ground. And I'm very appreciative of that opportunity to do so and serve. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bridget Daisy, Executive Director with the Clackamas Workforce Partnership, and our Chairman of the Board, David Green, who is also with Citizens Bank. So thank you very much for your time and attention today, and I'll turn it to Bridget and David to take it away.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
Bridget, you're muted.
Thank you, Cindy, and all. We are really eager to share a little bit more about our budget. We would traditionally be coming to you around the June-July time, but due to the nature of our current crisis, that was not the best of timing for us. So this was as soon as we could get on your agenda. So we're eager to share a little bit about our budget year 2020 and some opportunities for the future. So I'm going to turn it over to our chair, David Green.
I don't have control of the slides, right? Somebody else is doing that?
Oh, can I share our PowerPoint, or, okay, I'll share in hopes that I can do this in a really seamless way. Can you see the PowerPoint? Yes.
I can.
Excellent. Can you still see the PowerPoint?
Mm-hmm.
Was it just the black screen?
No, we saw it and then it disappeared.
We saw it.
Okay.
And that's it. Does anybody have any questions?
Oh, that's not it. Sorry, I'm sorry. There we go. There we are.
There we go.
And David.
Well, we appreciate it as always a chance to share what's going on at the Clackamas Workforce Partnership. with the commissioners. We truly appreciate the support that we receive from you, from the departments, and the collaboration that we have. Workforce partnerships are naturally collaborative, and we're kind of a nexus lexus of all these different entities and funding sources, but we live here, and in many ways we look to you not just to explain what we're doing, but to also for the resources that we need to get along and to do what we need to do. So our program year budget projections, well, you can see kind of what we're going to try to cover today. If we can go to the budget projections, if we jumped ahead, there we go. Keep going backwards.
Budget projection.
There we go. As we looked at the budget heading into this fiscal year, we had some rather significant deficits. We had some grant funding that was not coming back. I apologize. My phone's going to make a little noise here for a minute, but we had a number of things that we were able to do to try to right that. But as we got to the end of the budget preparation cycle, we had a hole of over $80,000 in our budget. And fortunately, as part of that $80,000 budget deficit and the uncertainty that we had going forward, because as we were putting our budget together, the COVID responses were just kicking in, and honestly, we still aren't through all this. We really don't know what the next year is going to hold, other than that there's going to be a lot of work to be done. But we were fortunate that after all of the different changes to our budget funding cycle, that we had access to funds through the payroll protection program, which we were eligible for, to try to fill some of our budget gap going forward. And we made a decision when we passed our budget to make that application, see if indeed we were eligible, make sure that the program was something that made sense for us, made sense for the commission. We ran this by our third-party outside auditors, and while they're providing some oversight to us in regards to that, they don't make recommendations. We in fact did make application and were successful in funding a payroll protection program loan. We anticipate, while forgiveness is still a little bit up in the air, the SBA is doing their best in a difficult time frame, but we anticipate that the entirety of that will be in fact forgiven, and the resulting use of that program will be essentially grant funds that we end up getting through this economic recovery program that will help us make it through this budget cycle. Bridget, do you have anything to add about the ongoing conversations that you and Deb are having, and as you forecast out into the future for the various federal and other funding sources that we rely on?
Yes, we anticipate that there will be more investments from the federal government in workforce development, because we see that the recovery from the crisis in the pandemic is really going to be one of economics, and helping people both get trained and be better prepared for the workforce of the future. Now that there are so many changes as it relates to automation in the future of work. So we know that there's going to be some opportunities. In fact, we're writing a couple of grants right now. What it looks like for the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act will be unknown until next year. But I would imagine that there are some more opportunities to leverage resources across the system. I would just say that all of the workforce dollars do not flow through the workforce board that impact and touch the workforce system. In fact, Title 1B and the workforce board dollars are really a small piece of the broader system that includes the Oregon Employment Department, Department of Human Services, our community college partners through Adult Basic Skills. There are many other pots of money that flow that we help to coordinate, but don't have direct say or how those dollars are spent. So I did just want to make that comment.
It looks like Commissioner Humbertson has a question.
Yes, your payroll protection program forgivable loan. Do you have a contingency plan in place if it is not forgiven?
Well, the entire, if for instance, the entirety of it somehow would not be forgivable. Now, it over a 24-week period from the date that we got that. So that period essentially, I think it ends beginning of next month. The funds that we, and I know this is not me answering your question directly, Commissioner Humberson, we don't have a contingency plan for all of it necessarily not being forgiven, although it would be a 5-year amortizing loan at 1% interest if we didn't. So not an insurmountable amount of funding to do, but the eligible expenditure on payroll, on the benefit side of the benefits that are eligible for this, not all employee benefits are eligible, as well as a small amount for utilities and rent. Over a 24-week period, our direct expenditures far exceed that amount because it's essentially equal to about 2.5 months of our 2019 historical payroll run rate. There might be a deduction out of those funds, out of that reimbursement in the event that our FTE or our head count, as it was in February of this year, was diminished by more than 25% during the eligible use period. And we have not had that. So it appears that we're very easily eligible for 100% forgiveness, but under no circumstances would we anticipate that we would have no forgiveness, essentially. And I don't know, once again, don't know if that answers your question, but if essentially, if somehow we violated the rules and they amortized the loan out, we would also technically be in default because we somehow violated the rules of the program. And once again, we determined that we're eligible for it. We had some help from our outside CPAs to review that and concur. So don't anticipate that that would be the case, but we would have to make payments on that over a 5-year period.
So essentially your contingency plan, worst case scenario would be to make the payments.
We'd be, we'd be compelled to make the payments. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I don't see any other questions.
All right. This is a kind of a static looking sources and uses. We worked on a few different methodologies for this, but we really wanted to create a document that was kind of an interface for us that shows kind of the way that our entity sort of overlays and interacts with all of the different partners that we have out in the community and how the funds kind of flow through to those. So we settled on this chart with the arrows coming down. And once this is online, Bridget, correct me if I'm wrong, this is going to be more of an interactive document. So you'll be able to go online to our site and click through and get some very detailed information about the funding that goes through these partners and then out into the hands of the programs and the program management and ultimately to serve the citizens of Clackamas County and the small businesses of Clackamas County. But this is kind of a new piece for us, and we wanted to share it with you. And then once it's up and fully live, we encourage you to take a look at it and give us some feedback. Do you think this tells our story? Is this what you want to see us sharing with the community? Bridget, do you have anything else on this? You guys worked real hard at making the decisions about what this would look like and what it would feel like as you kind of clicked through.
Yes, dollars in, dollars out, because there's so much complexity to the grants that we receive, who's eligible, how many people are we being contracted or funded to serve, what does the outcomes look like. It's a lot to put into a one-pager at a glance. And so this is really meant to elicit questions and curiosity. And so the more feedback that we get, or the more questions we get, the better we can make it. And to David's point, it is going to be more interactive. We'll have grant descriptions in addition to our projections of who we're funding, what are we funding for, whether it be a training, a cohort, an apprenticeship, support services, whatever that might be. We'll have some more detail wrapped up into that.
And when do we think this is going to be live?
We have an RFQ, a request for quotes, out to redo our website. And so this will not be up and live until we have a new website developed. And we hope that that will happen by around the first of the year.
Great.
But would be happy to answer any questions about the funding streams as they are now, because completely would understand that how to doesn't mean anything to anyone outside of our organization and those that we contract with.
I don't see any questions.
And Bridget, the other, I think this is, I know the board members liked this format because we're used to seeing our fiscal managers budget and then year-to-date budget to actual reports that we get and oversee. And it's broken down kind of by sources of funds and programs and all of that. And in some ways, this becomes a graphic for what we see with all the tiny figures. And they have to be pretty small for all the work that we do and the programs we do to get that to fit on a legal sized piece of paper. The numbers can be kind of small, but this is a great way to kind of line them up, and the buckets kind of line up real well. So I think that you guys did a great job with it. So
excellent. I did want to share a few things with all of you, though this is to really talk about our budget and where we're at now. And I think we're sitting in a really a good place to respond to the needs that our community has. There is a lot more to be done, but I wanted to show a lot of appreciation to the commissioners and to the county as a whole for the many things that you're doing to support our community and the people that we serve. Beginning with the environmental scan that you're doing with the coalitions of communities of color. Not only will that inform the county's work, but that will inform the workforce system and how we respond to those populations that are in need of training supports and other career exploration opportunities. Again, thank you for the Solution Series sponsorship that we had last year at our board meeting, and certainly in our most recent annual report, which is live now and it's fully online. We share a little bit more details about what we covered in our Solution Series. The prosperity collaboratives that we've just recently assumed a leadership role in are coming along very amazing. There's some really cool projects that are slated to be experienced before the end of this calendar year. I think the long-term range of building prosperity and wealth building, that's a long-term, like we're in it for a long time, which is why we're excited to be coming in and partnering with the county on that, because we hope that even beyond the initial investment that the county made, we'll be able to continue the legacy together in a way that serves people and hears them and helps build from the ground up. Setting up the Emergency Operations Center has been an enormous asset to our community, and we've been partnering a significant amount with Nancy Bush and the team there and all of the various subcommittees and groups. The connectivity and access to county departments to divisions that was promised last year by your administrator, Gary Schmidt. It's been really, you've all been true to your word, and we've been building even stronger relationships with all of the leadership. So thank you for that. And then I'll just close this, this slide of appreciation out by saying the performance Clackamas goals that really connect to the workforce system are though there are things that we still need to work out as far as like, how are we going to get this information and what does this look like in order to meet these goals? They're innovative, the innovation and the goal setting for like really, you know, aiming high is really felt within them, and that we also appreciate. And I forgot to also add the connections, the construction careers pathways projects that we're having some conversations about in the C2P2, also a lot of excitement and energy around that. I did also want to say that the opportunities that we see moving forward in partnership with the county and other partners that make up our system and beyond include everything from hoping that that we get the federal grant investment for the fire disaster that could fund positions to help with cleanup. So we are eager to put those into work should we be funded. Continuing the prosperity collaboratives, we're building a lot of coalitions and conversation around childcare solutions and how we serve our young people in and around the area. And everything from systems transformation, we can't do this without the county and all the many departments. So thank you, and we're really looking forward to this, you know, whatever is next.
So
Bridget, sorry.
I believe I have my hand up. This is Commissioner Schrader.
Yes, go ahead.
Are you done yet, Bridget?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So are we going to go back on screen then? Okay, great. We're finished. I just want to let you know how much I've enjoyed working with all you guys. You're one of the few folks that can get me up to go to a 7:30 in the morning meeting, you know, which says a lot. And really, yeah, really. One of the things that I've been really focused on is that connection with the ESD and childcare, because that's what we're hearing from our business community. I suspect we're having a listening session next week with education and children and what we're going to be doing. And even from my own personal experience with my own kids, having adequate childcare and access to the education piece has been huge issue. And what I've been kind of looking at, there's a number of models at the National Association of Counties where counties have used CARE Act dollars in order to do hubs for daycare and hubs for online learning for kids. And I don't know if you've seen any of that literature yet, but I'd sure like to get it to you to think about it. I keep trying to figure out ways, how can we afford? We've wanted to do daycare on campus for a long time. How can we afford it? Where's the revenue stream? And it might be interesting to take a look and see if we can emulate some of these models that are out there. Tarrant County, Texas has a county school-age child collaborative that looks pretty fascinating. And I would really appreciate the work that we can continue to do to make that kind of thing happen. I think the other thing is that the prosperity collaboratives are fantastic. I'm so glad you guys are involved in that. And I would like to point out to my colleagues that, you know, both Washington and Multnomah County contribute significant dollars to their workforce boards. We have heretofore not been able to do that. And that would be a discussion I would like to have longer term as we move forward as a county, because these folks are really, you know, doing great work with WIOA dollars. They're collaborating with all of the stakeholders in the region. And it's a shame to me that we can't seem to somehow at least think about it. And I hesitate to always ask for resources because I know what our budget's like at this time, but I like to think we can prioritize this as we move forward with looking at our goals and objectives, and really start partnering with this particular nonprofit to the same level that we have, you know, worked with the Children's Center and Clackamas, you know, Women's Services and so on and so forth. In my opinion, they need and deserve the same level of support so we need to, I'd like to see us up our game on that. So that's my editorial, my pro workforce editorial for the day. So, and Bridget, I'll be seeing you soon. So, okay. And thank you for all the work you do too, because you've been a real player in all of this for a number of years. So.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Schrader. And you were at our meeting this last week, our board meeting, where we asked our board members if there was anything that they wanted you all to know. And a few of those outtakes include being considerate of the construction industry, because right now between talent shortages and the cost of supplies, that's becoming an increasing barrier for them to get the work done that they need. So that was one point that was made. Another point that was made by Eric Johnson with Todos Juntos was more engagement and investment at the middle school level to help with career pathways planning and what does career exploration look like. So that was an area of interest. And I might be forgetting one. David, was there one more?
I know Jada just gave us some positive feedback about the rapid response teams. You know, you do a lot of planning for an event like the something like COVID or the wildfires, but seeing it in action and knowing that those plans allow you to be nimble, and so it was. I know she's still trying to kind of get used to being a board member representing the ESD, but I think those, especially Gordon Harvey's, he spoke at some length, as I recall, about how construction really is still chugging along, but that they're struggling. They're struggling to get sheet metal workers in his business, and he hears from the contractors that they work with that they would benefit. Now, just because they have openings doesn't mean we can put the right skilled people in there without us getting involved, and that's why we're here. So, you know, ears wide open, but we've got work to do is kind of what I heard from him. So.
Great.
Okay, Commissioner Fisher.
Yeah, thank you, Bridget. Thank you, David, for coming to spend some time with us. Always a pleasure to see you. So I'm curious if your board has been in conversations with the opportunity with the homeless services measure to strategize about that, to think about what linkages there may be and opportunities for connection.
This is the Here Together measure. Mm-hmm. Yes, I was on a subcommittee over the summer that was looking at the metrics that were going to be used. And I do know we did share pretty significantly, both for at the regional level as well as at the local level, the solicitation for applications for people to join those. I think that there's a lot of connectivity and or connections between the workforce system and helping to end homelessness and housing insecurity. So we're eager to align those systems in a much more intentional way. Oh, in fact, we recently did a survey in partnership with your housing authority, and I hope that I'm not stealing any thunder from any of your staff, but we were just looking at the numbers. We received over 400 responses from housing authority residents, and hundreds of them are looking for supports with training and job search assistance, and we are eager to get started with that.
Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you all being here today and presenting. Good to see you again, Bridget and David and Cindy. Great presentation. I know that Commissioner Schrader's been dedicated to workforce for a long time, and she again is showing her her passion towards this. And from my in the earlier years where I went to some of these sessions and listened to some of the employers talk about their needs, what followed from that was the fact that fortunately, a lot of the training programs that are that the labor unions have, the trades, I was so impressed by thereafter. So there's always the opportunity, and I know we are trying to help push people or direct people to those trades, that training, those unions, so they can get those skill sets up to speed and get a job. So sheet metal workers are right in there. I know that's an opportunity. I don't know what the current capacity is for training and also the jobs, but that would be one avenue. I always look to every trade and see what's out there. And as far as the resources contributed by the county, and Washington County and Multnomah County have this tremendous assessed value tax base that just generates a lot of income that we just can't compare. And on top of that, Washington County's got gain share, so they got some money that no other county gets in the state. And then add on top of that, through the whole CARES Act money, the only two counties that got CARES Act money directly was Washington County and Multnomah County, and we were just left holding the bag. So I'd love to, to be at the same level, have the same budget and the same level of funding that those other neighboring counties do, but I think we do the best we can for what we got, and but we need to be resourceful, and I think we're doing that. And if there's ever a means or a way, I know that Martha will bring that back to us, and we'll see what we can do. And I'm just hoping that the economy stays strong enough and the need for those jobs are still there, and that we can do our best to fill them. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Salas. We understand the difference between our big neighbors. Totally get that. And as we go through this, small incremental changes might have some pretty big impacts too, especially if they're targeted in areas where we all agree that a little bit of leverage goes a long way. And whether that's childcare or what else, I think if we just kind of have the mindset that if we could find a little bit, what could we do? How can we partner up? And Bridget's amazing with finding other buckets of money and other sources and other people to work with on that. So every little bit absolutely helps, like I say, especially if we work together and target that funding in the future. So there'll be plenty of things to go after, but we really, as always, very much appreciate your support, and we've got a lot of work to do, as you said. So,
Commissioner Humbertson.
Well, I'll be briefer than probably everybody else. I'm just going to say that I'm looking forward to working with your program and the C2P2 program, and that maybe we will be able to break the logjam of funding at least a little bit that Martha has so eloquently talked about. And I will leave it at that.
Yeah, and I just want to make one last comment, just so you all know. As an employer, I've been an employer in Oregon since the early 80s, and I always struggled to get skilled help. I really did. And so I not only understand it, but I felt it. I lived through it. I know how hard it is. And I did as an employer, I paid to put my folks through school. I provided training. I did everything I could to encourage them, number one, to stay with the program, to stay employed, and give them an education, and to build those skill sets. So I know what it's like, and I have a lot of friends in the business or businesses that are in the same boat trying to get skilled workforce. So I understand. Simply said, thank you.
We're on it.
I believe that does close out, unless there's any additional questions, our presentation to you today.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Cindy, thank you.
Yes.
Christina,
Okay.
everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Stay
Bye.
safe.
Thank you.
So that is all for today, commissioners.
Thank you.
Wait, we don't have more work sessions? Darn.
Okay.